Good morning, everyone. Welcome. So glad you're here. How are you today? Thank you for making the choice to be with us for this forum. It's the third in our series presented by the Foundation for Self-Leadership. And the title of this series in itself is so compelling to me: Sustaining Hope and Self-Empowerment in Our Schools, Greater Clarity Through the IFS Lens. So how about we just take a moment right now, bring to mind a school that you're connected with. What if this school community could sustain hope, especially right now? And what if they could access and experience self-empowerment? It's pretty compelling, right? So this is what we're about today. And yes, this is possible. Probably and possibly you are already seeing this in many ways. And what if they could experience this even more fully? So we're excited to share with you today our discoveries around this possibility. And we hope that in sharing that we can see many, many more schools experience this gift. My name is Joanna Curry-Sartori, and I'm moderating this series of forums specifically focused on bringing the practice and paradigm of self-leadership and IFS, which is internal family systems, to our schools. So to start, we'd love to know a little bit more about you. And some of you perhaps have attended some of our other forums. Perhaps this is your first time dipping into this space with us. So could you take a moment and just reflect what brought you here today? And as you reflect, perhaps you identify a specific concern that's on your mind, a hope, a question. And I want to invite you to go to the chat and just share one specific concern or hope or question so that we can know who we're with as we share this journey this morning and welcome you. So I'm going to go to the chat now. I just want to see what you might be sharing there. A question, a hope, a concern. Hope for future generations. Beautiful. Yes, me too. Me too. What else brought you here this morning? You could pop that in the chat. It'd be great to hear from some of you. I wonder if I have my chat on correctly so I can see. There we go. So people can't see the chat. Luke, is the chat on so that everybody, and we can write into everyone? There we go. Looking for a curriculum for teachers. And when you're choosing the chat, if you have a way to send it to everyone, I'll also read it out. Hope for a way to help teachers and students in this time of crisis, because they are truly in crisis right now. Absolutely. I'm concerned about people's well-being. Yeah, we're seeing so many signs right now, aren't we? At so many levels. Stress and anxiety, shutting down and overwhelm. It's intense. It's a lot that needs attention, loving attention, skillful attention. What else brought you here today? Continuing the search for helpful new synthesis. Absolutely, yeah. That constant exploration. I would like to support educators to have more opportunities to access their self. Yeah, thank you, Pavlina. Beautiful. So we're here together. We share such a longing, concern, hope, and questions. And I trust that in this space together, that you will hear things that are uplifting and helpful to you, and also hopefully leave with your new insights or your next step in action. And I want to acknowledge right now that it is wonderful already to get that pulse and to hear your voice. So throughout this time, periodically, we'll again open the chat and invite you to share in response to questions. And the rest of the time, we're asking you not to use the chat so that we can give our full focus to the presenters that are with us today. We also will keep the Q&A tab open at all times. So as questions bubble up, feel free to populate the Q&A and we'll come around to that towards the end. So this forum is our third in this series of 3 forums, and this one's entitled Adopting Clinically Informed Approaches to Enhance Educational Outcomes. So today you'll be hearing from 4 mental health professionals with extensive experience integrating IFS model in their work in and with schools. So whether or not you're a mental health provider, an educator, a parent, a community member, I do trust that you will find nuggets that resonate and are relevant for you on your journey. So right now, for those of you either that are new to IFS or perhaps haven't joined some of our previous forums, I just want to give a little background to our work together before I pass the mic, so to speak, over to our panelists. So now it's been for over 20 years that Dr. Dick Schwartz has continued to refine and develop the IFS, or internal family systems model. And initially it's been developed as a psychotherapeutic model that's now research-based and world-renowned as a healing modality. And it's quite remarkable in a lot of ways, but among other things, and I think significant to us in the school setting, it integrates wisdom from the psychotherapeutic field, from family systems and in general, from systems thinking, mindfulness. It's trauma informed, it's attachment based. And so in this, you can hear it's very holistic. And so understandably then, beyond psychotherapy, many of us are saying, how does this apply? It's really a unique and transformative model for all of us that can help us shift our experience and relationship with ourselves and each other. And in this, it frees us to be more connected and collaborative as we work for the good of all. So since 2013, the Foundation for Self-Leadership has been very active operating as a nonprofit arm of IFS. And they have the intention both to support research for IFS, but also they have an extraordinary focus on the dissemination of this model beyond the therapeutic realm. And so IFS is now benefiting many, many arenas as a philosophy and practice. Veterans, it's in prisons. We're bringing it to medical professionals and hospitals, businesses and coaching, and of course, relevant for all of us, for schools. And again, recognizing the power of this model, it's now been for many years that mental health providers learning IFS have been saying, how do we get this to our children younger? How do we get it to them proactively, preventatively, as a way of being with themselves and each other? And so pretty soon we started exploring how to bring this into schools. And as many of us are naturally systems thinkers, we got pretty creative and have been entering through many, many different doorways. So sometimes we've worked directly with children, and you'll hear some about that today, either individually in small bunches, like little lunch bunch groups, or often with whole classes. At times also we've thought we need to focus and we work with the adults in the system, the educators on the front line, to equip them with stronger and alternate tools to de-escalate challenging situations, to better understand others and respond with compassion. We also, understandably, we partner with families, not only to help them with their own family dynamics, but to help them build that connection and consistency between home and school through the IFS lens. We hands-on coach administrators to be able to more fully welcome all the viewpoints and expertise in their community, and therefore lead with even greater effectiveness and confidence. And we facilitate safe and productive community discussions to address divisions and discover connections, unlocking our community's capacity for true collaborative action. So we've really been exploring these many possibilities. And for years now, there are pioneers who've been doing this work. In this moment, I specifically want to acknowledge the efforts of Dr. Ralph Cohen and the professors at Central Connecticut State University, who've been working at this for 15 or 20 years. They've infused IFS in their school-based marriage and family therapy program. And so as the graduates filter out into schools throughout the state and the country, they're bringing these tools with them. And I want to acknowledge my gratitude as a graduate of that very program, as I've witnessed the ripple and the benefits of these efforts. And to further build on these efforts, 5 years ago, I founded the Self-Leadership Collaborative as an organization to lead both local in Connecticut, where I live, efforts, as well as global efforts to bring IFS and self-leadership into schools. Thanks to grant funding from the Foundation for Self-Leadership, we've developed a framework to apply IFS in schools and conducted program evaluation with promising results. And I've written a book about this approach that we're in the process of publishing. So truly, I hope you can see and appreciate that this is an extraordinary and global collaborative effort of wise, dedicated colleagues partnering together. And today, you will hear from 4 of these amazing colleagues of mine that I'm so impressed by, grateful for, and uplifted by on a regular basis. And I'm so thrilled that you'll have the benefit of their company and wisdom today. So let me introduce them to you. First, I want to introduce Ann-Katrin Bachmann, who has a PhD. She works at the Department of Educational Psychology and Diagnostics at Hildesheim University in Germany, connecting with teachers, preschool teachers in the context of outpatient clinic for youth and adolescents. And her language portion project is KEE. She offers the ideas of IFS to kindergartners and schools in workshops, trainings, and conferences. Next, I'd like to welcome Roger Goddard, who also has a PhD, and he has served for the past 32 years as the Chief Psychologist, Director of Internship Training, and Director of Wellness Management Services at Trinitas Regional Medical Center in New Jersey, in the US. He provides consultation and trainings to schools, agencies, government organizations, community groups, and corporations. Next, I'd like to welcome Shadi Rami, PhD, serves as a University Associate Professor of Psychology, and he's the director of the ITHRA Center for Relational Enrichment, the Lebanon branch. He helped design peace-building curricula used for conflict resolution in the Middle East and for a new IFS-based youth camp in Lebanon. Finally, I want to warmly welcome Julie Abrams-Foudy, also PhD, has brought her innovative and creative energy to schools, parenting groups, workshops, and her private practice for over 30 years. She joined the Self-Leadership Collaborative at its inception because she was passionate about the potential of transformation that IFS can bring to educational settings. So as you can see, this panel represents work happening all around the world. And this conveys our conviction that the IFS experience is universally applicable and beneficial. And with that said, I do want to acknowledge that we recognize the limitations in our experience, our roles, and our cultural viewpoints. And so we hope that you will join us in considering how IFS can apply in your role and benefit your community. We imagine that today you'll be inspired to try new approaches and take new action. And after your time with us, if you find that you want to learn more, you are welcome to join our community efforts. At the end of this forum, I will be telling you about more upcoming learning opportunities through the Self-Leadership Collaborative. So, can you tell it's going to be a rich, rich morning together? To begin, please join me in warmly welcoming Julie.
Well, good morning, everybody. Hope you're doing well. I am truly thrilled and honored to be with you today and in such great company. It's just wonderful being a part of this cutting edge. And the fact that you're here today on a Saturday, I think you recognize that as well. So I'm going to start with a few important IFS terms, namely parts and self. And there are so many others, but these two I think will help enrich your experience today. I'm going to just speak of them right now in very broad strokes, but we will have more time later to flesh these out. And after I do this, we're going to have a nice grounding exercise to help us land. So in brief, parts. The idea here is that we are all born with subminds or aspects of ourselves, sides of ourselves, and parts take over the person to different degrees. So this is really the opposite of what most of us were trained with and being the notion of a monomind. So that took me some time to really wrap myself around and understand. So in very general terms, we are all different in different settings. Like you're different when you're playing with your kids or you're meeting a deadline or giving a big talk, right? Different parts take over. And they're only called parts because it fits with the everyday vernacular. Like Dick Schwartz decided on this term because people say a part of me this, a part of me that. So the IFS mindset is to acknowledge and appreciate these parts in ourselves and in others. That's huge, and that's quite radical. It's a big shift from the idea, especially as mental health professionals, controlling or fixing these parts. And the rallying cry we often hear is all parts are welcome. So why are they welcome? It's because these parts have a positive intention, even if they have a negative effect. So for example, this one always helps me, that anger is not always helpful. It can have some really messy outcomes, but truly its intention is to protect ourselves in some way. So that's a little touch on parts. And then what is self? Self can be described in many ways, especially by kids, but it can generally be understood as that sense when you're at your best, feeling a sense of ease or flow, when you're coming from an inherent wise place in yourself, and the idea is that it is always there, even if it's behind the clouds. It's when you're fully online and present. In that state, you can think flexibly, you can recognize it as what supports whole brain learning as educators, what supports whole brain learning in yourself, in your clients, and your students. And you might also feel physical signs of self, such as a kind of a sense of strength or steadiness or calmness. So next we're going to try a little exercise where maybe you'll have a little opportunity to get in touch with some of your own parts and those maybe some self-energy as well. All right, I'm going to start my timer. All right. So allow yourself, if you can, just to let yourself get comfortable. Perhaps begin to notice where your body meets the chair or the couch you're on. It helps me to kind of feel the points of contact with the chair and the ground, and perhaps even allowing the chair to hold you. And feel free to close your eyes. There will be nothing to miss if you shut them, or do whatever helps you to become a little bit more aware of what is going on inside. And if you would like, allow yourself to begin to focus on your breathing. As you transition from all that you were doing before this webinar, you may notice reminders of this day. Perhaps parts of you that were activated. And just see if they will give you permission to take a couple of minutes to quiet down inside, knowing that what is important to them is something that you can come back to afterward. It's not uncommon for people's minds to drift. And if you find yourself going on your own journey, feel free. You might notice that as you breathe in, you become just a little bit calmer. And as you breathe out, you may let go of any unnecessary tension. As you begin to feel perhaps a little quieter inside, you might notice a kind of spaciousness open up. I invite you to simply scan around inside and see what you notice. Perhaps you notice physical sensations, emotions, or thoughts. All are welcome. Each of these may signal a part of you that would like to be noticed and attended to. See if it would be all right to get to know one of these parts, to be curious and interested in it. Whatever comes to your attention, allow it, accept it, and be with it. And feel the response from that part of you. Notice your inner space now, in this moment, whatever is there. Just notice your experience. The more space a part gives you, the more you can be with it, and it can sense your presence more clearly. Now, in your own time and way, slowly bring your focus back to the outside world and the group. Welcome back from this journey. When you're there, and please feel free to share a word or two on the chat describing your experience. Going to bring that over. Thank you, Kathy. We have that sense of feeling peaceful and relief. And I'll just say that when the I think of them kind of as the curtains of parts open up. What's there in its place is that all this spacious, calm care. Oh, how beautiful. Just even reading and connecting with you, feeling that is so opening to my heart. Oh, Pavlina, my excited part is to be here, is just taking over. Exactly. I sense it quite vividly in my body. Me too. Awareness. My timer. Oh yeah, we're doing great on time. Just, I'll take a couple of more. Ah, this is really great to see who's there. So fun. I'm so glad that people in this group began to feel that openness and calmness. And in the IFS world, we often take a second or two throughout the day and in our classrooms and in our hallways to notice and attend to the parts that are there and to reconnect with our self energy so that we can be self-led and open and compassionate and resilient and thoughtful. And in doing so, we bring so much peace to our students and our teachers, and they begin to feel it as well. And then they come from that place. I have chills. All right, thank you so very much. If you want to learn the full pause process that we do use, you're going to hear a lot about it today. I cannot tell you how much the selfleadershipcollaborative.com has got going on there. It's an incredibly cutting edge source and resource. And I have just gotten so much out of it personally. So I really do welcome you. You'll hear more about that at the end. And our colleagues, I'm so excited to be able to kick you over at this point to the absolutely wonderful Anne-Katrine. She is our first speaker today. You'll be hearing from all four of us, and after that, we will go to Q&A. So Anne-Katrine, you're in for a great ride, team.
Yeah, thank you, Julie, and thanks everybody for being here and listening. I'm happy to be here, and I'll take you with me into some slides that I prepared. You should be able to see them now. And I want to give you an insight into my work, bringing IFS to teachers, parents, and children. And these images I can present with the friendly permission of Brian and Sharon Eckstein, who did, Sharon Eckstein did these interactive cards. And this is how I introduce educators. And I say, well, I wish that you're all feeling like this. You're attentive, you're wide awake, and you're eager to learn. But of course, I know that some of you might have parts inside that rather look like this. I know in California it's early, so if there are some folks from California, you might still feel tired. And I also know that there are always people having critical voices who are saying, who's this? She's not a teacher. How can we believe her? Or she's from Germany. That system is totally different. And the good news about IFS is that all our parts are welcome. And when I present something, I always introduce myself from the inside first. Here, these pictures are just with males. It should be females. Well, there's one part in me that really wants to know the truth, even if it's not very comfortable to know the truth. And one part inside of me loves what I'm doing now, teaching. And there's a part inside of me that's a helper part that always wants to help other people. And because I have a lot of training and I'm quite old now, it has so many tools that it thinks it can solve anything, any problem. And that it has a risk. And this is what can happen then. My helper part gets really burned out. And yes, that's how I encountered IFS as a client when I was burned out. And I can say personally, IFS really helped me personally, but also professionally by leading a life that's less stressful. And in my profession, being a therapist, I work more effectively, but with less stress. And I have less of an agenda, and I'm still reaching a lot of goals. Yeah, I come from northern Germany, a little town with a university called Hildesheim. And I teach, I do research, but I'm also very practical. I work with children and adolescents, teachers and families, especially with developmental orders and learning disorders. And so I'm still always right at the front, which I love. Yeah, I would like to do a little exercise with you on this photograph of a friend of mine. You can see two boys that look really self-confident. And that's not always the case. We want our students to be self-confident, but often they don't feel very self-confident at school. So the little exercise is about you remembering a moment when you were still at school where you did not feel confident. And I would like you to choose a moment that's not bringing up and activating a lot of emotions, but just a little situation where you remember you were not very confident. And when you have that situation where you did not feel confident, just feel inside. Are there any sensations around this in your body or around your body? Are any feelings coming up when you remember that situation? Any thoughts? And then you just think all these feelings, emotions, and thoughts that have come up and that a part inside of you has shown you. And you just say goodbye to this for a moment, and you might reconnect later. I did this little exercise so that you realize that even a memory can activate these feelings and thoughts. What is it like for students, for kids, to be in these situations directly at the moment? There will come up a lot of feelings like shame and failure. And the interesting question for us is, how can we help children with those feelings? And this is what I want to tell you about, how I'm doing this. And I'll start with a case example of a boy, 11-year-old, and he was in our outpatient clinic, and he was drawing a picture and talking about this picture to me. This has been redone by an artist. He came up with a picture and said, "Oh, I just feel like this stupid parrot. The only thing I'm supposed to do, I cannot do. I'm a bird, I should be able to fly, but look at my heavy shoes and my skinny legs and my little wings, I can't fly." And everybody's laughing at me. The blackbirds, they're making fun of me because I can't fly. And the frog, I hate him. He can jump higher than I can fly. I'm really angry with myself and with the rest of the world. But I have one dream. I would love to fly over to the mountain top there and have a look at that house because I'm so curious about that. Hearing this, I'm very happy because this boy is revealing a lot of his inside. If normally as a therapist, I just ask, how are you feeling? I wouldn't get these insights. But when kids are talking about parts and we help them to externalize their parts, then we really get such rich information. So what he said is he thinks it's his fault. He can't do it. Everybody's making fun about him. And he's angry with the whole world. And that's why he came to me, because he was getting aggressive. After 2 months of working with him with IFS, that's the next picture he did. He said, I still know the parrot inside of me can't fly really high, and it's still heavy with these shoes, but I made it. I only dare to fly at night, but I fulfilled my dream. Aggressiveness had really gone down by then, and we had also worked with the teachers. And when he left my therapy, he left a picture with me and he said, please hang this up. And I said, what's on the picture so that I can tell other kids? And it looked like a tree with no leaves and big branches. And he said, yes, this is a tree with big landing ramps for all other weird birds that might land in your office, just like I did. So this is a good example of what IFS can do. What has changed in my work is when I do psychoeducation with children, I now do it parts informed. Like that boy said, it's my fault. I'm guilty. I can't read and write, and it's my fault because I'm too lazy. So what I now do with teachers, parents, and the child, I look at several pictures we've made for psychoeducation. Like with this boy, I got teachers and parents together and I said, who do you think is responsible for you not being able to achieve well at school? And the boy said, it's me, I'm too lazy. The parent said, it might be school because they are not using the right book. And the teacher said, well, it might be you to the parents because you're not doing the homework properly with the child. And then I can say what research says. I can say, you're all wrong. It's nobody's fault. And I also address the parts' fears. I say, you are not stupid. That's what we know. And there are lots of things you can do, even though you have dyslexia. And that makes a big shift if you do psychoeducation from a parts-informed perspective. But how to do parts work with children, even if they are younger, or especially when they're younger. I have one client who loves dressing up as her own parts. And then she asked me, please take a photo of me, of all my parts, me being dressed up as those parts. And with these cards, with these photos, we work. And that works really well. And her parents just told me 2 weeks ago that they used that with a teacher at school. The girl has a math teacher at school where she does not dare to lift up her hand and say anything. And so the parents, when they talked to the teacher, they got out some of the cards of the kids with her permission. And they said, our daughter might look very strong, but she has this shy little part in her, and she has this courageous little Viking. But in the maths lesson, she's more shy. And the teacher really got that. And she talked to the little girl and said, I know you have this courageous Viking, and often in maths, I just see the shy part. So how can I help you? How can we invite the courageous Viking? And that worked. So it can really help understand and give tools how to work with kids at school. And it's not easy to imagine how can we get this concept of self-quality and calm and compassion into therapy with children. Here's one example. I had one boy who was choosing little animals for all of his parts. And he said, well, I'm the wild dragon, and that's why my teachers hate me. But I'm also the curious and sporty dog. That's why I'm doing really good at sports. But I'm also the shy rabbit. So that's the way how he could externalize his parts and get to know them. And then he said, but the problem is these parts and these animals don't like one another. And a lot of people don't understand them. And I said, well, is there another animal in the basket that you can choose that is good friend with all these animals that you have already chosen? And he looked in the basket, took some time, and then he came out with a bear. And he said, yes, this is the loving bear. And this one is good friends with all the other animals I have chosen. And in therapy, we could work with that. He had the bear interviewing all the other parts. And that way he got to know and love his parts. And he had the bear in his pocket. So when the wild dragon came out in school, he could touch it and remind himself why the wild dragon was doing that and how to calm down a little bit. Altogether, there's not so much material around for children. So we have a little group with Joanna and some people, and we're doing material for children. These are just 2 cards that have been done in Germany, but there are more. And there are also some books. This is one that's done by a German primary school teacher who is a psychotherapist now. and which is very helpful. So material can be really helpful. And I would like to talk about something that I call the teacher dilemma. And we even have this dilemma as parents. When our kids do well, we have all this carefree time. Like you can see my twin sister here with her boy, everything's fine. And they have this time, precious time of self-quality. They just look at one another and talk. But as soon as your child has problems, you come up with an agenda. No matter if you're an educator or a parent, you want to teach something, you want to improve something. And then you have the helper part in front. And that's when things become difficult because you're more managing and trying to help and have an agenda. And you're not as natural as this kindergartner here, who's not reading out a book, but just looking at it with all the kids so that they have an interaction and then enjoy. And with this, we have a training that I want to share a video with you about so that we can see that. At first, you will see a mother with her 2-year-old girl who is a late talker. And the mother is looking at a book and really trying to help her little girl. When you look at that first video for 30 seconds, just feel, how do you feel when you look at that video and do the two enjoy that? And then the next video you see is after the training we did with a mother, and it's totally different. We look at that for something like 50 seconds and just also there feel what is coming up when you see that video and do the two enjoy it. And now I will pass over to Lou to share the video.
Schauen wir uns das Buch hier an. Guck mal, das ist auch toll. Das ist auch toll. Zeig mal. Lass mich das mal vorlesen. Guck mal. Mama Huhn schläft tief und fest auf dem Nest. Ja, da. Guck mal, Mama Huhn schläft, hat die Augen zu. Das Pferdchen da. Oh, Gänse. Gänse, siehst du? Pferdchen. Noch ein Pferdchen. Mama, Pferdchen. Und schon wieder ein Pferdchen. Guck mal, 2 Pferdchen wieder. 1, 2 Pferdchen. Oh. Ein Frosch. Quack, quack, quack. Mama, Gänse. Ja, die Gans hat ein Kleid an. Guck, ein ganz
I mean, it's a huge shift you could see there. In the first video, when the mother was still trying to achieve something, it was not much fun. She was having the book, she was choosing the book, and the little girl did not really enjoy that. You could see that from the expression on her face. And in the second book, totally different. The little girl chose the book, the mother was following the child, the mother was curious, compassionate, and the little girl really learned a lot. And now you might ask yourself, well, how come that the mother changed so much? And it's about her attitude. It's about something inside of her. And I would like to do a little experiment with you that we did with that mother and other mothers in the training and educators. I call this the China experiment. I would like you to imagine that we send you to China for half a year and your obligation is to learn Chinese. Not easy. The support you get is an old Chinese man, but you get no mobile, no laptop, no television. Now imagine, how would this old man need to behave so that you can learn Chinese? and put some of those ideas into the chat. And I can read them out. Yeah, first thing, that's what the mother said. He would need to be patient. He would need to listen openly. Sue says also he would need to be compassionate, attuned to where you are and where you're interested in. He would need to be enjoying so that I can enjoy. He would need to be kind and move slowly. Yes. And once the parents or the kindergartners, they do this China experiment, we ask, and how do you need to behave so that kids can learn from you? And then they understand, okay, it's just the same. And that's how the attitude changes. And I would like to take you into my slides just for a little 2 minutes. Yeah, it's not easy in everyday life as an educator to have self-quality and not be in a manager or helper part. So we design material that's helpful. If you have a book for children, for young children, with the first page and the last page, and they are glued together, these pages, then it's easy to get into a helping part, start at the beginning, end at the end. And if there's a lot of words written, you just read them out. So we designed a book that's in a box, and you can just pull out any page. And we have little advice for parents on how to go on about this so that it's great fun for the kid. And I will finish with a vision. I think it needs a vision. There's a nice saying by Leonardo da Vinci saying, fix your course to a star, and then you can navigate through any storm. And some of my vision has already come through. In September, we will have a preschool conference in Hildesheim called Language of the Heart that is dealing with IFS in kindergartens. And I have a workshop with kindergartners, and 4 weeks ago, I had this citation I would like to read out to you of one of the participants. And she said at the end of the workshop, why do only such things as inane as McDonald's end up here in Germany from America? And why have we never heard of something as good as IFS before? If we were to practice with our children what IFS and the self show us, that would change the entire world. And I think she's true about that, and that's my vision. Thanks for listening, and I'll hand over to Roger due to time.
Hello, good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. Roger Goddard, and it's wonderful to be here. And boy, I want to thank Julian and Katrina. I'm just blown away. It was just so wonderful and so fantastic. So I want to share with you some things, and I will go to the slide. So welcome. I want to share with you the wonders of using IFS in the schools. Once again, I'm Dr. Roger Goddard. I'm chief psychologist over at Trinitas Regional Medical Center in Elizabeth in sunny New Jersey. And I oversee the psychology internship program there, psychologists, psychiatric residents there, and the various programs. But particularly, I created and direct Wellness Management Services, which is an outreach program where we go out to companies, corporations, schools, and deliver all kinds of training and school consultation, organizational development programs. I also have a private practice seeing adults, couples, families, and children. Particularly our work, though, in the schools has been very intense. I've been working at this for well over 30 years, and I'm really excited about the work in the schools. And particularly, we offer programs to improve student achievement, to help special needs and at-risk students succeed better, to improve teacher effectiveness and parent involvement. Why I love IFS. I learned about IFS many years ago, and I was really taken, it's so life-changing. It was just so wonderful to be It's changed my life in so many positive ways. It really has helped me to have so much more of an inner harmony. Pre-IFS, there's like battling and hating parts of myself. I didn't like this, I want to put that there. And IFS really helps us to really appreciate, love, and support all of these different emotions, parts, feelings, things that are going on inside of us in such a wonderful, beautiful way. It's helped me to resolve various life problems, and got plenty of life problems to go around to resolve with IFS, improve my relationships, giving me a better understanding of other people, having less stress and deeper life appreciation, and helping me to overcome deeper emotional wounds. And it's given me a new way of having spirituality be part of my life. As a psychologist, it's changed what I can offer to my clients. It's really helped me to help clients reduce their stress and anxiety, overcome life problems by consulting with their parts to feel good and whole inside. You go from a house divided to a house united. Basically, they start off with really, again, coming to therapy, so many therapies and approaches, get rid of my anxiety, get rid of my depression. I don't like this about myself. I hate this about myself. All parts are good, according to IFS, to really appreciate these parts, support these parts, love these parts, take care of these parts, and have these parts heal and grow. So really go from a house divided at war inside with oneself to a house united and in harmony. Helping clients to really heal longstanding wounds, parts, and traumas. And IFS is particularly great for couples therapy. Very typical comment that a patient made just a couple of weeks ago was, in all my years of getting therapy, these past 2 weeks have been more helpful to me than what I had in the last 20 years. My IFS contributions, I've written a few books for IFS, which are the IFS Toolbox, the IFS Teacher Manual, the IFS Parent Manual, and the IFS Deck of Playing Cards. I'm just so delighted to say that they've been all endorsed by Dr. Richard Schwartz. My personal dedication to helping schools. I just really feel that schools are where it's at, children are where it's at. They really need incredible help in this day and age. My view is basically that we're undertaking an experiment in child rearing. Never before in history have children been brought up by electrons, by so much technology, audiovisual stimulation. And I think it's doing a number on their ability to succeed in school and life, making them very right brain oriented, kinesthetic and feeling and emotional and body oriented, but really having a deficit in terms of left brain skills, thinking, language, math, understanding, all sorts of things like that. So children have great needs. I believe that student emotionality has created intense barriers to learning for children today. They get very hyped up and emotional. Our pandemic has really added to that, where children are feeling all kinds of things that they just don't understand. Teachers are overworked, overstressed, underappreciated. The number of at-risk students is very, very high, and they're not getting the help they need, in my view. And institutional racism is a problem in many schools. Helping teachers, students, and parents to use IFS. Well, I have both very idealistic parts and very realistic parts. My idealistic parts want schools to be more caring, compassionate, and from the heart, and have less emphasis on standardized testing and competition, to focus on what students are learning and not on their grades and test scores. And for schools to use IFS because it's wonderful and will lead to a worldwide opening of hearts and minds. But I also have realistic parts that know, from having worked in schools for many, many, many years, that teachers are burnt out and have no spare time in their day, want easy to use tricks, tools, and techniques, and are fed up with the educational fad of the year. My realistic parts know that schools are under tremendous pressure to improve student achievement, which is tied to their funding very often, that they have to deal with very intense politics and issues, and they need trainings to be in alignment with their key goals. I believe that IFS can help schools achieve these key goals. I use a lot of mnemonics in my work to make it easier for children, adults, parents to remember different things. So the key goals in schools I define as the four key school STAR goals. S for student achievement, T for teacher effectiveness and enjoyment. Teachers need to enjoy their work, love their work in order to be there and be present, loving the children that they're working with and excited and fueling these children. Key goal for schools, A stands for at-risk student success. And finally, R for rewarding and embracing diversity. IFS can help schools achieve these key goals. IFS helps students with fables difficulties. Again, my mnemonics, please excuse me. But a lot of children have fables difficulties with focusing, ASD, behavior, learning, emotional, and social difficulties. IFS helps to overcome one of the greatest barriers to school success, student emotionality. Our emotions run the show, but we're never taught how to deal with emotions. We kind of pick it up from the street. We don't always hear how. There's no courses to deal with emotions. And emotion, stress, anxiety really involve the fight, flight, freeze, stress reaction, in which the brain takes over and higher brain functions shut down and our amygdala hijacks us. So in school, when children experience that hyper emotionality, feeling anxious, stupid, scared, sad, insecure, frustrated, then their higher brain functioning shut down, and it really creates a barrier, a block to their being able to be attentive, learn, take in things, understand what's going on in school. The ways in which I help schools to use IFS is either through direct IFS training or integration into other school programs, such as teacher trainings, counselor, special staff training, individual teacher consultations, teacher stress management, really essential ingredient, etc. Some of my discoveries from my schoolwork include that training needs to be ongoing and monitored. Buy-in is critical by all staff involved, and trainings must provide something for teachers in order to be used. Research shows that what is learned in a in-service and a training is really forgotten or not used within a week, 97% of the time. So it really needs to be something that is ongoing that helps teachers to use it in a different way. Helping schools to use IFS, steps and interventions. My 5 steps are having teachers, school staff, and parents use IFS. Teach it to teachers, have teachers use it, instruct students in using IFS, have teachers use IFS with students and the classrooms, and use IFS to delight in life. So many teachers really, they're under so much stress. There are so many things that they're juggling. They have to go from point A to point Z in the school year. And students don't often cooperate. They can be disruptive. They can have all kinds of difficulties. Classrooms are so intellectually diverse that poor teachers get so frustrated and whatnot. And they are overcome with their stress, their frustrations. They're dealing with multitasking in the classrooms and have so many difficulties. IFS can really help them, really helped a lot of teachers to use IFS to experience their job and the students and their work so differently than before. Flexibility is very important in using IFS. Terms need to be flexible. Using terms such as emotions and moods instead of parts very often would be helpful, particularly at younger grades. Smart or wise self may be more understandable to students than core self. And very often it has to be adapted to urban school environments. I do a lot of work in urban school environments, inner city environments, multicultural environments, where very often in terms of using IFS, certain things need to be out front, such as racism and discrimination issues in parts, teachers overcoming stereotyping and turning off to students, creating alternatives to teachers yelling, blaming, or shaming students, helping students feel greater pride, worth, and importance, overcoming feelings of being marginalized and made to feel inferior, and dealing with bullying, aggression, conflict resolution, and inner city issues. Examples of using IFS with teachers and students. For example, using it with an undermotivated ADHD student, a teacher dealing with 3 sarcastic, disruptive, and mocking students, a guidance counselor leading a group for students with self-harming and relationship problems. So if you forget everything else I'm throwing at you here, try to remember this: 3 key steps for teachers and students to support their parts, to really make it simple, straightforward, easy to use in terms of helping these various teachers, students, parents to be able to understand their parts. And step number 1 is to name and get to know your part. Step 2 is to support and comfort, help to heal your part. And step number 3 is to be in core self, create an ongoing relationship with your part. I often have people choose pictures to identify and support their parts. So in terms of these examples that I mentioned, step number 1, identify and get to know your parts. Sam was a student with anxiety, ADHD, and OCD. So he particularly used the pictures of having the label of ADHD, feeling as though he's got this label. Everybody, knows the label more than they know his name. And he feels inside the picture of shame and stupidity and feeling bad and dumb and lazy. And he felt like a mosquito that just kind of bothered everyone, that's buzzing from place to place, that people want to take insecticide and just, kill and put out. And himself too, he just hates parts of himself. And he felt like he had this monster inside of him, this ogre. But so he just dealt with it by having a part that just wants to go to sleep. But then his OCD part kicks in, and he just got very meticulous about everything, writing things down, being like the little police officer in the picture that he chose. Step number 2, support and comfort your part. Sam holding, soothing, helping and problem solving with his parts. He chose the pictures of the dog listening, to try to listen better to what people are telling him, asking him, listen better to what's going on inside of him, what his parts are wanting him to do, what they need, what they're saying, what they're about, to really be able to think about it a little bit more, use his mind better, and to comfort and soothe his part, like having a teddy bear or a pet, because he had a dog and a cat in his house that would comfort him and soothe him, to really do this for his parts, to examine his parts like a doctor would with a stethoscope and a teddy bear, and to really problem solve, to start to think with the parts, talk with the parts, find out, well, what solutions can we have to all these difficulties we're having? Step number 3, being in his powerful, wise, smart self. He chose pictures such as the tiger, the lions, to really feel more empowered, to feel stronger, to feel better, which really helped him to be able to think about problem solving and doing problems that he was asked to do, giving him a greater sense of strength, being a Superman that he can lift boulders in a single bound, and to really be able to focus better and do his work better. The teacher working with difficult students was a teacher who was very stressed out, anxious, overwhelmed, and she identified these parts. So step number 1 was to identify these parts, name these parts, get to know these parts. So she picked pictures really having to do with just juggling and being a master juggler, plate spinner all the time, that she had to put on a face that really hid what was really going on inside, that she was feeling overwhelmed, like she was in a circus of disarray, and inside feeling a sense of fragmentation. If you'd look in the mirror, she'd really see inside. She was just screaming inside, feeling horrible, dealing with parts that really felt incredibly intense. And she would have parts and protectors that would deal with this by just going to eat and soothe herself by eating at the end of the day, overeating and drinking. Step 2, supporting, loving, comforting, and soothing her part. She chose pictures such as time out, to take a little time out, a step back from her parts, to be able to just be with the stress of the parts, just kind of extend self-energy, positive, warm, loving, caring, self-energy to the part of her that was hurting, that was upset, to comfort that part, and feeling the difference between having a storm inside of her with thunder and all kinds of difficulties to, as I also call the core self or self, the solar self, to when she can be in her solar self and really warm these parts inside, soothing these parts and being with these parts. Step number 3, being in core self, having an ongoing relationship, bringing the part to a healing, safe place. She used pictures to really be able to clue her into the fact that she needed a lot more time for herself to recuperate from what was going on, and also in the classroom to be able to take more time to take a step back, understand the parts of the students that she was working with, and really speak to the students' core selves instead of their parts, or to affirm the parts that the students were having in order to get those parts feeling as though they can be recognized and heard and responded to. In order to do this, she really knew that she had to nurture herself, whether in the classroom or after school, to be able to take time to either imagine herself being in wonderful places or to meditate and comfort herself. Other pictures that students use to pick that students pick to identify their parts are these. Maybe you can think back to when you were in middle school, when we were all in middle school. Great sense of alienation with the cliques and being in, being out, falling in love, and not knowing if the person you loved you or didn't love you, and the rumors going around, or the upset that one feels inside. So very often students will pick these parts to represent parts of themselves. Pictures that students use for helping their parts and being in their smart, wise self are these, such as being proud about being creative and doing their work, feeling good, smiling, feeling comforting in the parts. Pictures that teachers use to identify their parts, such as feeling as though I'm in prison, getting so sick and tired of the pandemic. We're kind of confined by our masks and like rolling up boulders up a hill, or feeling really insecure, worried inside, or sense of sadness and depression, or just rage and anger. Pictures teachers often pick for being in self and healing their parts, or dealing with children, babies, really helping to heal them, being meditative, really taking time for oneself to be able to be with one's parts. Critical issue I find in terms of helping schools and teachers and parents and students to use IFS is to make it accessible, breaking IFS wisdom up into bite-sized, easy to use steps and tools. Because IFS in certain ways can be a bit esoteric, vague, mysterious, even potentially seen as a little cultish, hard to understand. So be able to use easy to use learning materials that can help to make it easier to teach and use in one's life and in one's work. We'll get back to that in a second. I'll show you some samples of that. But I also want to mention, before going to that, that, like Anne Katrine, do a lot of work through all the grades in schools, K, elementary, middle, high school, but particularly there was one program that we developed for preschool and K and pre-K classes to be able to help the classes. We developed 3 videos in order to target and help students at a very early age begin to relate to their emotions and their parts in a way that can soothe their parts, understand their parts. So we created 3 videos to be able to help students to learn about their parts, have this perspective. Teachers showed the videos several times a week. Teachers and parents use key questions throughout the day to remind children to get better at these 3 key skills. And we really used empirical data and program results monitored. We monitored those results to see if this really worked. And our pre and post intervention measures found that students were able to use the skills at the 0.0001 significance level. These 3 skills were naming, talking about and describing my emotions, calming, caring for my emotions, helping my emotions to calm down, and problem solving my emotions difficulties. So I will share some of the materials with you. So IFS handout materials I use from the IFS teacher parent manuals and IFS toolbox to help make IFS easy to learn, remember, and use. What's the picture there? The IFS toolbox. So first I go through with teachers the benefits, how it can really benefit them, what the advantage will be for them and students, 5 steps for using IFS with your students to understand it, try it, use it with yourself, teach it, use it with students, help individual students with it, enrich your life with IFS. 5 points for understanding IFS. We're all made up of parts. We also have a positive core self. Protective parts often get extreme and take us over, but all parts are good and need understanding and healing, and strengthening our core self access is healing and empowering. We use worksheets to have teachers identify common protectors they may have, such as a critical part, a rejecting part, controlling part, caretaking part, and so on. And to know that our protectors are often rigid, bossy, fearful, anxious, untrusting, on steroids. Our protectors need love, care, healing, empathy, appreciation. And we help our protectors when we ask them about themselves, help them learn how to calm down, find out what they're most fearful of, go through the 8 C's of the core self. We use self maps in order to really see what are the parts that surround me, my core self, such as critical, judgmental part, distancing part, caring, loving part, workaholic part. Do various collages and various mnemonic tools to help people, help teachers, IFS teacher peace tool, name the part, understand the part, empathic caring questions, accessing 1 or more 8 C's and creating solutions together. All day long self energy. IFS calm tool, so we use different tools to be able to help teachers understand and use it. Out of my head into my heart tool. The IFS SOM tool. Please sit alongside to the left or right of me. Very often our parts, when they're inside of us, they can really wreak a lot of havoc. So just to have a part to be able to relate to it to our side is very, very helpful. Go through partsfulness meditation, as I call it, and selffulness meditation. And then there are a lot of materials that we use with teachers in order to help teachers instruct students in using IFS, breaking it down into parts. An IFS lesson plan for students with learning objectives, setting the stage, define the learning objectives, and so on. And all kinds of student workshops. All kinds of student worksheets for being able to use it, help students identify their parts, understand the core C's of the core self, the 8 C's of the core self. Situations in which I can use IFS to calm a part down or overcome a problem. So all kinds of different ways. I wanted to show you a little piece of the video to help you to understand in terms of the videos that we created for preschool children. First, there was a song that we did with them to be able to help them appreciate their parts and their emotions, that they're all good, and to help them to use 1 or more of the different of the 3 key skills for them. We don't have enough time, so I'm not going to show that, but have faith that it's there. So once again, really delighted to share with you some of the work that is being done in the schools with helping teachers to use IFS and students and parents, and it's really wonderful. My wish, my vision for everybody is to learn more about it, use it more. realize that it can help us so much in our personal life, but can really be so enriching when we bring it to our workplaces, particularly schools, to be able to help students, children have this perspective from a very early age to use and grow for in their entire life, to really have a very different perspective on what life can be all about and how to harmonize inside and resolve our difficulties. So with this, I turn to Shadi, and Shadi, take it away. You're in good hands.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Julie and Katrine and Joanna. Before I introduce myself and the center where I'm at Sprat Center in Lebanon. You're wondering why a Lebanese center talking about IFS. I'll say this in a bit, but before I'd like to start with a small exercise, and if we can start sharing the PowerPoint, please. So I just like to invite you to bring to mind a recent or relatively recent situation when you were just starting to feel frustrated and then received some help. So take a moment, you may close your eyes, sit comfortably, take a deep breath, and take a moment to recognize that situation when you felt about to be probably disoriented or confused and received help. And that help could have been given to you through a piece of advice, through a hug, through an accepting look at you, could have been given to you through some practical help, somebody giving you a hand, simply through someone listening. And while you're noticing the help that you received, just take some time to notice how it feels in your body. Where do you feel is in your body? If there are any thoughts that come in with it, any images, any shape or color, and just take some time to let this soak in you a little bit. Imagine how good it would be if we always had access to such resources. Take some time to appreciate these resources. They could be inside of you or around you or in people that you know, but they're just the resources that would help you go on. If you'd like to share a comment or two, just whenever you feel free to come back with a deep breath, taking it a bit short to save some time. So just go back to your breath and come back to our setting whenever you're ready. If you'd like to write a word or two about how it felt, to recall that moment or that situation where you had access to these resources. Great. Sense of openness, acceptance, like all aspects of me could be here. Wow, it's nice. No, so this relief, gratitude, felt held. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for your generous sharing. So as you can see, I've shared 2 pictures of resources from a story that I'm about to tell you about a camp with youth that we do at ISRA every year, but I mean, it's been off for 2 years because of COVID. And this year, with all the problems it took place in Lebanon, though it was very difficult because of COVID first, and because of all the situation in the country for anyone who's acquainted with it. So next slide, please. I just take very quickly to introduce, this is our 2 teams at ISRA Center in both Lebanon and Jordan. ISRA was founded in Jordan about 15 years ago. We founded a branch in Lebanon about 10 years ago. ISRA is an Arabic word for enrichment. So the center is for relational enrichment. And the center works, next slide please, on actually the relational needs, where you have the top 10 relational or social emotional needs. I'm gonna count them very quickly. We have 5 A's, next please, and the needs. So you have acceptance, affection, appreciation, approval, attention, and you have comfort or compassion or empathy, encouragement, respect, security, and support. So these social emotional needs, we have a program that has been going on about these social emotional needs for the last 15 years in the Middle East. And it's been taken from attachment therapy, from integrative therapy, Richard Erskine and David Ferguson. So next slide, please. Just what I want to tell you about this is that our relational needs could be either met or unmet. So whenever they're met, what happens is that we start experiencing positive thinking, like, I can do this, I'm in the right place, I'm in the right environment, and then it triggers positive emotions. The positive emotions, then on turn, will bring positive behavior, which will lead to positive outcome. This is the success story of children, schools, parents, universities, everywhere. But then when needs are unmet, unfortunate things would happen. So when needs are unmet on the social, on the emotional level, we start experiencing some negative or unhealthy thoughts like, I'm not the one for that, nobody loves me, I'm not good enough, people are not good enough, I should take my own right within my hands, I should not accept any help, or I should be selfish, any sort of unhealthy thinking. And then that would go on to unhealthy or painful emotions like frustration, anger, fear. And then it will lead, unfortunately, to destructive or negative behavior, which will lead to unsatisfying or painful outcome. So in this part, so we've been working on this project, and then we met IFS a while ago. And then we realized that in this part where there would be the need that would be unmet, what happens next is that with the protectors will come up. So next, please. The protectors are actually, Roger was talking about all sorts of protectors. So they would be a set somehow in us that brings some unhealthy thoughts or holds some burdens that are unhealthy reasoning, painful emotions experienced by the protectors that might lead to some behavior that we see as negative that would protect us. So to help in this field, so IFS was integrated into this program in our organizations, both in Jordan and Lebanon. And I'm gonna tell you that, first of all, what do I have to bring? There are 2 points. Next, please. First is that what we're doing in the Middle East, both in Jordan and Lebanon, is somehow showing us and others the university of the model of IFS. Everyone has parts, everyone reacts that way, and we all have or are selves that have the qualities of selves, the resources of self. We're all connected, we all have courage, we all have acceptance, we all are curious, we have the 8 C's, all of us. And then the work with teachers and students that we do, this is the second point I'd like to talk about, is that the work with students and teachers that we do is both they're teachers and students, but they're outside, the work we're doing is outside of the school context. So we did teachers retreats where we take teachers outside of the school, we work with them on special programs, and we do also youth camps for youth. I'm gonna tell the story for time, tell the story of a youth camp that we did this summer in Lebanon, and that would illustrate the way we work in general. So next slide, please. The youth camp, as you can see, this is a picture of the ending, the closing of the camp. But then I will talk about how it started and how did we start working with the youth about to discover their parts. So next slide, please. The thing is that when the youth, I just want to tell you in less than a minute that the situation in Lebanon was not exactly good. The country is full of corruption. Corruption had led the country to bankruptcy. Almost everyone is, the currency deteriorated. We had no gas, no fuel, no gasoline in the country. So shortage of electricity and of being able to drive our cars. So in that specific time, at the peak of the crisis in the summer, we decided still to hold the camp in order to restore hope, specifically with teenagers, because we felt that they are the ones who they have all the energy and they need to do something. Not that, and this was somehow a breakthrough that was done with this camp. Now, what was the technique that we applied and what were the steps that we applied? So next, please. Next slide. So what we did is that first we introduced the youth to the needs and then introduced them to their protectors, how protectors would start to work in, and that protectors are good, that all parts are welcome, that all parts are good. And you know how with teenagers, everyone wants to shut down the protectors, to shut down the parts that are angry, that are rebellions, that are saying no. And so it was that the protectors were welcome first somehow. And then when the protectors were welcome first, we started some artwork divided on, it was done over 5 days, and the 4 days were done, throughout 4 days we're doing artwork, and we were doing the C's of self. Like just Roger mentioned the 8 C's of self. And so they were not clearly divided to youth, but at the end they were seen as courage, curiosity, creativity. So creativity was activated throughout these activities of drawing parts, drawing things. Some of the parts were sad, some of the parts were happy, some were joyful. And then what happened later after, next slide please, is that what we did is that we did also fun and extreme activities. So they were meeting the parts, the sad parts, the tough things in their lives and their environment, and they arrived all sad and in despair. And then when we started, and most of them expressed the need to leave the country. You could feel some wave of sadness all around on the first day of the camp. They just came because they had nothing to do. They were just saying nothing would happen, nothing good would come out of it. And then when we started working on some activities, it was painful. So we had some extreme sport activities and some training and awareness work at the same time, so that they get introduced to the whole work and still get to let things out, to move, and to spend some energy. And I want to tell you that this was not easy, but we felt held by this power of hope that we had when we started saying, we're gonna do the camp, whatever happens. And what I want to tell you that this is universal. Every time people open up to their self-energy, they feel the connectedness and they realize, I mean, this is how I got introduced to IFS in general. And this is how, and by the way, the connectedness with the Institute, the connectedness with the initiative, and the connectedness, I would like also to especially thank Anne-Catherine, because the connectedness with her, it was like, during the camp, we were chatting sometimes, sending WhatsApp messages. This is happening. What should I do? What happens? How can I do this? I felt despair. And so this connectedness held me somehow. It was the met needs inside of me that showed me that I have the power within to meet the needs, and also the connectedness that brings me the power from the outside. So next slide, please. What happened is that when we had all these activities, we had also compassion activities where they shared their sad stories. Some of them had lost parents to COVID or to the crisis or because of events or because of the Beirut blasts that took place about 2 years ago. And so we managed to welcome also not just the angry part, the rebellion part, but also the sad parts. And it was like so good to have them have the sad parts along with the happy parts, with the smiling parts, with the hopeful parts. Because sadness, when sadness is walking with hope, it gives a meaning to life. It gives us strength, it gives us value, and it gives us depth. So the paintings went on, and we had also with dinner, fun evenings, fire camps, where they also met the elements somehow, sometimes focusing on water, sometimes focusing on fire, and all done within 5 days. But all the children and ourselves, we felt that this was like a month of activities. So I'm not going to take a long time describing the things because I want to end with some points, but I want to tell you something. So next slide, please. I want to tell you that the connection from self. So the things they were drawing on, they had the form of leaves and they were drawing. And then we collected all the leaves and this connection of all the parts formed wings where we did the wings together by all their parts, and they all somehow wore the wings and took pictures of themselves with the wings. Some of them flying, and even a young girl had some injury, so she couldn't jump, but she was so happy to feel that she was injured, but she insisted to stay at the camp because she wanted to get every single minute out of it. So she went to the hospital, found out it was not serious, thank God. And then she came back to the camp and told her parents, no, I'm coming back. Everything is fine. I want to come back. So we were all experiencing this openness to hope, both from children, from teenagers, and from ourselves. I want to tell you one thing. We also spoke to their parents about this, but I want to tell you one thing about this. When we said, because all the pictures here, we have taken the permissions of the people. So when we told the people at the camp, is it okay if we use your pictures on YouTube or on Facebook or whatever? And they were all like, what? It's okay. We want you to do that because we want to spread this hope to as many people as possible. We want them to know that hope is possible because it's shining from within, and because in connectedness, we can give much more hope to everyone, including ourselves. And by the way, we're regularly meeting them despite the situation. And we were planning on a Christmas camp, but COVID went crazy in Lebanon, so we didn't do it. But we still are meeting online sometimes, and we're planning on a camp as soon as possible, not just the next summer. And actually, they'll kill us if we don't do it. So what I want to tell you out of these stories, and if we can end with the final picture, next slide. So this is, again, this picture that I started with. This is where we all collected. It was 23 children. Also had special children with special needs with us, 2 cases. And they all held the wings, and we had this picture together. They were so hopeful because of it. So I just don't want to consume a lot of time, but I decided to share the story to tell you 2 things. The IFS model is a model that really restores hope, and it has this openness, like Roger said it very, very clearly, has this openness to spirituality that says there is something beyond whatever we're doing, beyond the pain that we're experiencing, beyond the challenges, beyond everything. And this is where, when we go back to what we started with, we recall these tough moments, and they become a blessing in our life. And this needs a tool, and IFS is an excellent tool for that, where all parts, the angry one, the rebellion ones, the swearing ones, and the hopeful ones, the sad ones, they're all welcome into a spirit of happiness and creativity. So I wish I could share much more about this, but I decided to share the story of the camp, not the teachers or the others, because it's a school setting, but outside of the school. Sorry, it's with school population, but outside of the school setting. So thank you, and I will hand over to Julie now.
mute myself. All good? Can you hear me? Yay. Well, thank you very, very much. I'm going to speed it up a tiny bit more than I normally would, just so we can get some time in there for Q&A. But I just wanted to let you know that I wanted to talk with you today about 3 ways that I shifted my perspective and my way of working. And in some ways, my whole talk here is really about sort of stretching out Roger's slide, maybe 3 or 4 of the slides on why he loves IFS. And so I asked myself as a psychologist, what has been so revolutionary for me that I'm actually here talking to you about IFS? What do I want to say about something so big at a personal professional level? And it's true, I've been working as a clinical psychologist in schools and a private practice for over 30 years. And not once did I share my therapy model with others. And I'm traveling this year. I even talk about it with bartenders and friends and stewardesses. Or stewards, everyone who wants to hear about it. They seem very open to it. I've done tons of talks on other subjects, including the power of mindfulness in education, but never, ever on the change in mindset, which helped my therapy work before. So there are 3 major changes I'm in the midst of experiencing that I hope you as mental health practitioners can relate to and hopefully be inspired by in 3 acts. Next slide, please. So Act 1, where does change come from? This was big for me. I now see my job as helping to facilitate a relationship between a person's self, and you've heard about that today. Think about this inherent inner capability, maybe even what you felt in our opening meditation, and their parts. And again, think personalities, which are running the show at any given moment, for better or for worse. Those little beings who take over and who tend to be pretty misunderstood. So I'm connecting them. But change is definitely not due to my expert advice, which I secretly always knew. But it is mainly helped by me remaining in self and helping others explore their parts. So in doing this, they unblend from the part that hijack them so that they have access to the qualities of self that are already innate to them and to all of us. So this is done over time and changes are made at all levels. This is definitely not a quick fix. So parts, and again, think behaviors, feelings, what have you, I am called to attend to are often considered bad because they can be so disruptive or seemingly disproportional to the situation. But from an IFS point of view, the behavior reflects a subpersonality or part who's taken over and is trying to meet an important need in the person. Shadi had talked about those unmet needs. It's exactly that. So our job, once again, is to be in relationship with the part that's blended with them so that together we can discover its positive intent. Thus, as we've all said, all parts are welcome. There are no bad parts, and students feel this very quickly in their support by myself and others. So I first need to connect to the part in me that might be up and settle it down. And then I connect to the part in the kid. If I express disappointment, control, or try to shut down or manage the part, I unwittingly perpetuate more shame in the child, which only makes the problem behavior something more likely to occur again. So I always kind of knew that too, but it is just so much easier to not do this now that I have a really true deep regard for the part, rather than seeing it as something to contend with, something that signals a problem or some behavior I need to fix, which would definitely bring a part up in me. So the language can sound a little bit like, hey, Jill, it sounds like a part of you is very scared right now. So just like that, we've divided the pie, and even just with that initial opening, the child can often find a little space and can speak for the part rather than from the part, and then we're on our way. So now when I work with others, I know that there is an unmet need and the student's behavior is expressing that, all on behalf of the child's well-being. And that is at the core of how IFS has made a change in me as a psychologist. So once again, where does change come from? As I help others, we say unblend from their part, they access their own self-energy, their source of change and growth. Next slide, please. The second major view is viewing myself, or the second major change is viewing myself as in the same soup, as my students, clients, and really anyone. The IFS model does not hold therapist and client differently in any way. We all have parts and we all have self, and that is what being a human is. So being in the same soup for me means I feel a visceral experience of human connection to the other's experience. Knowing that, my parts just show up a little bit differently, or sometimes they even show up the same exact way. Next slide, please. So we helpers in IFS commit to nurturing our own self-awareness. We lovingly explore our responses, quite often through therapy, but also in these IFS trainings like this one today, you might have gotten in touch with some parts. And, I definitely see that as a bonus. So we need to understand the role our parts play in the school environment and in our own lives, because kids themselves need to find out who took over when they stormed out of the room. And so do we in order to best help them. We're human just like them, in the same soup. So let's take a moment and do a mini exercise. So just take a moment to think about what hijacks you at school. What are common responses when a child is being seriously loud, talking back to you or a teacher, is out of control, super upset? Those big moments. What does that feel like inside? Go ahead and compassionately tune into the part that emerges in you. Who comes up? Might this appear as a physical feeling, thought, emotion, image? And if you feel so inclined, please put in the chat a word or two about who appeared in you. Panic, this imposter syndrome. I can see a little dragon if I have a student resisting me. These are very tough for we helpers in schools to deal with, because we're the ones who are supposed to handle it. And so it is very, very natural that our parts come up. And they're tough, they're big. And so that process of settling them down really helps the critic. I'm not doing this right. They're watching. All these very tough feelings. So our jobs are not easy there. And we are in the same soup with each other. So as a school counselor, it truly helps to notice thoughts, feelings, or sensations that come up in order for us to unblend. I feel fear, unable to cope. I feel like a small child. My controlling part has to come in, right? So it's a parts party, one after the next. So the move here, the way to go, I acknowledge the part. If this works for you, you can try it. I acknowledge it, and I see if it would be willing to give me some space. And honestly, with some of the ones you're bringing up, they don't always give space. And then I just sometimes need to ask the students to give me a moment to address that part or part concerns and just kind of figure out, how is it trying to be helpful to me? I validate that, and it usually opens up space for proceeding from a place of compassion and clarity with the kid. But truly, most often, as soon as I look inward and acknowledge the experience, a little clarity takes its space. Next slide, please. Thank you, everyone, for being so honest and sharing. So welcome to Act 3. Actually, you know what? Previous slide. You guys have that up? There you go. Thank you. Nope, I'm going to go to the next. Time. All right. So welcome to Act 3. In this last act, I hope to give you a little taste of how IFS works with an individual student who is really disrupting the class in a big way and is kind of hijacking a whole bunch of other students. So this message I'd like to offer you is that I began in general, one of the big things that changed for me is that I began to provide more focused and tender care, and my reach broadened. For example, one teacher one day said she was mixed on going for an interview and she looked distressed. And she was open to exploring what was up inside and found that there was a part who tried endlessly to please everybody, which she held with care and some tears. And this was on a simple 10-minute break from school. She would have been Xeroxing probably. And she emailed me later that day and said she was canceling the interview because she found clarity. But let us just dive back into this student. I'm going to share what initially turned this second grader around. His name is Frank. We've met about 7 or 8 times, all on Zoom. And we discovered the positive intent of a cycle of behaviors, we say parts. So like Anne-Catherine said in her talk, I have shared these creative drawings of his parts and his inner hero, his self, to increase both parent and teacher connection to this young kid. All right. And I've also connected with other family members, which has been super, super necessary. So let's go to that slide, to the one that says first part. Perfect. So welcome to the part of Frank who feels he cannot continue to do the work anymore. This is pictured here with the arrow on the top left corner. And it shows up for him externally as a huge grab for attention. And it really looks deliberate. But something else is going on internally. What kicks in for Frank is that he's driven by these past responses, and those are out of awareness for him. So I asked Frank about the part that comes up when he gets in trouble. We had been chatting for a while, and he called it, getting in trouble. And he easily told me about this part, immediately speaking of him as a little separate person, about how hard it is to keep working and how he just wants to draw and not write so many words. These words are hard. Think about Anne-Catherine's talk. And he found this part physically as a feeling of being hot in the head. And this is how the part shows up. And it helps increase awareness of it. And he explained how rushed this part feels when he realizes he has to hurry and time is running out. And if it's hard to make out in this picture, Frank is thinking about all the work in this thought bubble and saying, I can't take it anymore. So this is an example of the part taking over the ship. Next slide, please. I'm going to 3 minutes and be done. So I might move a little bit quickly. So by the numbers 2, 3, and 4, you're going to see a series of other parts who are all triggered by the one before. There's Silly, who says, yay, I did it, and effectively stop the workload. There's the uh-oh part. And this part remembers he's supposed to stay out of trouble. And then thinks I probably already am in trouble. I shouldn't have done that. And by 4, you'll see the turtle in the shell who feels crushed inside the shell. He said that, from this part's point of view, other kids are laughing and the teacher is saying, get out. And the part says, I am such a knucklehead. And the smiling and laughing peers are saying, ha ha, he got in trouble. So each of these dysregulated parts heroically jumps in to handle the stressful feelings that the child is experiencing. And they don't realize that they're perpetuating the problem. Next slide, please. Beautiful. I'm going to just touch on this, looking at time. So I think one of the most important parts here is the 5th part, and it's on the left. And it's the I am so bad part. And you see a boy sitting in the hall feeling dejected and embarrassed. And this part feels that nobody likes him and that the kids don't like this behavior anymore. And the sad part has a thought bubble. It says, if I didn't misbehave, none of this would happen. So think of those part pictures that you've seen so far that Roger showed. This is exactly right from that source, right from that place. A student is standing near him saying, why are you out here in the hallway? And the teacher is saying, finally, he is out. Now, I can tell you this is not how the teacher would behave or what she is thinking, but this is how the part experiences it. He described this part as very sad and guilty and alone and unloved. And to wet your whistle for potential interest in future training and more that you can get into, this is very likely the sentiments coming from the wounded, vulnerable part of him that all these other parts sprung into action in order to protect from being in touch with. And then there's the another chance part, which we will save for another time. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to share that from conversations with Anne-Catherine, she talked about another way of talking about self, and I really loved hearing Roger's versions as well. But she talked about this inner hero, which I used with him, and asked him to draw one hero inside that knows all the other parts, that is there to help them, who is clear, strong, loving, your deepest self, who is a source of strength inside of you that you depend on, and that all these parts trust, and choose colors that make sense for him, for this hero. And we did this work. This hero interviewed these various parts. And at the end, what he wrote was, there's room for all the feelings. So what a beautiful outcome for a creative, fun-loving boy who has tons to give this world. So we're thick into this work, my friends, and his many parts are still running the show. But we have a course, and the teacher is open to working with her parts and changing the attitude that, he's manipulative, this is his choice, he's disrupting my class. That sense that it's all occurring out of choice, or maybe it's out of his choice and he needs meds. Like, she's really working with her parts and is really open to it because it feels great to be understood and to, have some inner choice within her. So I think I'm just going to summarize it with, end with that. But I want to thank you for hanging in there over these 2 hours, and the depth and the beauty and the intensity of what we're talking about today. And I send you back to our dear Joanna. Thank you.
Wow. Isn't that tremendous? What a rich buffet. So in a moment, we're going to have Q&A with our panelists. And if we could have all the panelists join me here on the screen, that would be fantastic. Before we do that, I want to ask all of you who've been with us in the community this morning to support me in acknowledging them. So could you take a moment and just notice, as you see their faces all join me here, what are specific feelings that are resonating inside right now? Thoughts and possibilities, images or stories. So if you could put one specific about what's landed, what's resonating, what's staying with you. We had Anne Katrine's stories of, all the ways she can externalize with the students, and those stories with the parents reading to their children, and Chatty's stories, the hope that's possible when we welcome and accept all our parts at that camp. And Roger's description of how he brings us in and explains the relevance to whole school communities, and parents and teachers and students can recognize their parts. And Julie's personal reflection on how it's been a transformative model for her and how she's worked with some of her students and clients. So looking at the chat, stuff is coming in. Hope, appreciation, overwhelming feeling. I can see how IFS, it's going fast. So excited. I'll just capture some of the key words as they fly by. Hope for possibilities. Get the teachers on board by having them experience it. Absolutely. Yes. What are some of the other nuggets that are staying with you? Golden nuggets that you can take and cherish and nourish from our time with these really brilliant, gifted, dedicated panelists who, by the way, part of what I want to think too is that you do the work, you've done the journey yourself. So you bring this with such integrity. The experiential learning is essential. Absolutely. That's where the light bulb happens. When relational needs are met, positive emotions and actions follow. Hope shines from within. Yeah. A beautiful phrase from Chatty. Feeling connected. Wonderful. Thank you, Bridget. What else is landing for you? What's resonating inside right now? And as you do this, if you're also starting to find your questions, you can start to put those in the Q&A section. This has been so rich. I imagine, I want to acknowledge that some of you spoke for parts at various times that were feeling a little puzzled or overwhelmed or excited. It is a very rich and deep model. And when we take it to schools, we find ways to make it bite-sized and very digestible, and it goes very deep. So that's why if you're interested and curious, we are creating containers for ongoing study and community. Looking at the presenters, feel their self-energy, inspiring, open to changing how to do work. I want to learn this well enough so I can teach it to my school and counseling students. Absolutely wonderful. Join us. There are many possibilities. IFS also brings us all to the same table, inviting all of us to do the same exploration. It is a horizontal model, not a vertical one. Beautifully put, yes.
Yeah.
How can we meet the other whether they are at without judgment. Pictures drawn from the boy and seeing his own openness to all parts. It was profound to hear the stories and examples you all shared. It really brought it to life. Yes. I'm wanting this to deepen my job as a mindfulness teacher in schools. Fantastic. Yes, a lot of my journey started bringing mindfulness to schools, and then this became the umbrella and the container and the bridge to make mindfulness a way of being all day, every day together. Fabulous. Good. So, Julie, did you want to say something? I just saw you went off mic. Yeah.
I know it is so hard when the chat is going by, but
Yeah.
when somebody had asked about medication and medication as a part,
Mhm.
I brought that up briefly. And I think one of the best things to do is to just Google Frank Anderson. He does very brilliant IFS work and medication. He's a psychiatrist out of, I think, at Harvard, a long time IFS practitioner. And I want to say that if parts are really up and are not being attended to, they can shut down the helpfulness of medication. So at least that's my experience. That have you ever, taken something for sleep and still been awake all night? So that normally should shut you down, but if your parts are up, they can overtake and be even stronger at times. Of course, it depends on the meds, but and everything else. So, I would definitely just check out Frank Anderson to learn a little bit more about that.
Wonderful. Thank you. So Roger, there's a question from somebody wondering how they can get your manuals. Would you like to speak to that?
Thank you so very much. Particularly, they are available in the IFS online bookstore and in digital form from Amazon. Thank you.
And at the end, I'm going to post the website for the Self-Leadership Collaborative, and you can find all our panelists there with contact info for them. Roger's bio includes his direct website as well, so you can learn more about his work and ways to receive his materials that way as well. I'm just catching more coming into the chat. There's a number of things to track here. So I'm struck by the old meaning and the linkage of IFS initials as International Friends of Service Committee. It all has international potential. Yes. And Julie says, this is cool. Yes, it is. It's wonderful. Joelle says, seeing these students spreading hope, truth, and compassion to their families, community, and their own future, inspirational. Yeah. So I do want to open a space for questions for a few minutes. We've about 5 minutes. We can take questions. If anyone would like to, they can put it in the Q&A tab so that I'll be sure to decipher it from the chat flying by. So please do visit the chat if you've got a question on top for you. And also I'm wondering, if as we wait for that to come in, if there's anything from the panelists that has occurred to you that you wanted to share and add into the dialogue here. Okay, Pavlina, Roger, how easy or difficult was your buy-in with teachers? Any tricks how to go about it?
Absolutely. Most important thing, tuning into, what is it, WFM, what's in it for me channel. And so really do a lot of work with teachers' stress management. As I said, they're overwhelmed, they're stressed out, they're underappreciated, they're overworked. And to really start off with IFS, introducing it how all throughout the day, they can tune into their self, they can experience and deal with children by seeing their parts and through to their core self. So they're not kind of being reactive and their parts taking them over. So very much, great question, very much. It is very important, so important to be able to start off with really showing teachers, having teachers use it in themselves, in their lives and in their work in order to have them then say, wow, will this be great if I can get my students to also be using this? Thank you, it's a great question.
Wonderful. I see a question from Carol. Have you thought about connecting to individual teachers or small groups via FaceTime and Zoom? Thank you for that question, Carol. Yes, I'm sure other people may want to add to this. Through the Self-Leadership Collaborative, we've been offering numerous online learning opportunities for educators. So again, I'll just post that link now. Here we go. I'm pressing. There we go. Sorry. Hello. I was talking with myself for a moment there. So Carol, thank you for the question about online learning for educators. And yes, we've been offering multiple ways for educators to learn online in community, especially since the pandemic. So if you visit the website for the Self-Leadership Collaborative and go to learning events and workshops, we have some upcoming one-time events. So there's like an introduction to the power of pause, which is this hip pocket tool that Julie mentioned, just to bring IFS skills in a simple way into everyday life. We'll be having monthly pause and reflect sessions with different members of our global community, the different teachers you've been meeting on these panels and others, so that if people just want to come sample it and drop in, and it's a moment to self-care, sample it for yourself, taste it, just go there. Welcome anyone you know who's interested in that. And then we have an upcoming ambassador series, which is a series of 6 sessions and workshops for people who want a more in-depth study and experience in a small group cohort. And we have 2 of those starting in March. And these have been really profound. You know, the teachers say, yes, I have concrete practical shifts and tools to use tomorrow with students, but even more, it's been the relief. It's like almost like saved my life during COVID. It's given me a resource and a home base inside to be the eye in the storm. So please do check that out. So let's see, are there other questions coming in? We're juggling our pieces here. No, I don't see other questions bubbling. So I'm going to post in the chat. So that's the link to the Self-Leadership Collaborative. So again, under the team section, you'll see everybody's bio. And the learning event section has upcoming events. And many of the people you've met through these panels are actively and ongoing involved. We have monthly meetings where we're sharing best practices with each other and informing each other's work. Many of them are helping to host some of these upcoming events. And we really, really welcome the opportunity to have you with us to explore and deepen and take this to your community in the way that can be adapted, relevant, and applicable in your culture, in your school, in your classroom. And we just hope that, as you've heard, there's just such tremendous potential. We really honor and acknowledge all those parts. So we're not pushing down and getting rid of, we're welcoming all parts and coming right back into that core self, that resource that we all have. And it really is at the essence of what schools need at this time. So we do have another minute. So let me see, Joel has a question here. I'm curious if any of the panelists have experienced a part from a child that is resistant to IFS parts work, and what strategies or response you have had to that part. Great question. Would anybody like to answer that question? I'm wondering, Anne-Katrine or Shadi, if you have any thoughts on that?
Well, very quickly, because I experienced it with teenagers. It's simply making them know that this part is welcome, and really being up to it, this is very quickly. This is how I can answer.
Yeah. So when we're curious, we say, tell me more about that. I want to understand where you're coming from. What's your perspective? We're talking to those parts. That's what we mean by welcome. So it's not that we just say, you're welcome, right? It's like there's a toolbox in how we do that we learn through the IFS model. But it is as simple as that spirit and that heart of welcome. Anne-Katrine, did you want to add final thoughts here?
I can add, I sometimes simply accept if somebody says, oh, I don't want to talk about these parts. My mother is already talking about the parts. Sometimes you get kids of IFS therapists and then they're just fed up. And then I accept, and in the end, I have the same attitude that IFS gives, and then I don't need the words.
That's beautiful. Roger, yeah.
In IFS, very often when there's a part that's resistant, as everybody is saying, we might work with that, accept it, affirm it, go with it, and not push it in any way. But sometimes we might ask that part, gee, or the person, gee, it seems like you have a part of you that's skeptical, that's kind of sarcastic, that's kind of, would you be able to ask that part if you could just like sit on the sidelines for a minute or two while we talk to this other part we were trying to talk to, and that if he like objects to it or wants to jump back in, he can always come back in and he's still under control. But would it be okay if that part you can ask that part to settle down just a little bit? And sometimes that'll help people say, oh, okay, I'll put that part on the side and get into the work.
Yeah. which is actually a beautiful final depiction. That's what we mean by internal family systems. So we've got these parts and they're all in relationship to each other. When we come in, we're, instead of just having a random dialogue where we're dragged around by all these different parts, we can start to be the leader inside. We can start to kind of make space to hear from everybody, but everyone's going to take their turn and they're going to work together as an inner team. As we build that inner harmony, we have greater capacity to build the outer harmony that we want in our families and in our schools and our world. So thank you for bringing that full circle. So now we've shared why internal family systems. That is why. Okay, my friends, so it is top of the hour. I'm going to one more time post in the chat the link to the Self-Leadership Collaborative, and also I've included a link to a feedback form. We have been so excited to host these forums, so grateful that you've made a priority to be here, so eager to welcome you to our community, to our learning, and to contribute your expertise, your wisdom and voices to this journey, this discovery of how to share IFS in schools. So please fill out the feedback form. Let us know your thoughts about what's landing so we know what's working and any suggestions. And again, feel free to join us for many of our upcoming learning events in the coming months. So thank you one more time to all of our panelists. Thank you to the Foundation for Self-Leadership for presenting this, for hosting us, for facilitating tremendously generous support. And I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful, restful, peaceful Saturday. Thank you, friends. Take care.